The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on uncovering the examiner's comments for taxation. My name is Alexander Leach and I work in the education team for the ACCA in the Middle East. Just before we get stuck into our really great webinar today, I just want to give you a little bit of housekeeping about what to expect and how to use the platform. So we're using a recorded webinar function, so it will be distributed afterwards. You may even be watching this back on playback, but if you are watching this live and you do have any issues, please just refresh your browser, close it, come back in, and boom, you'll be online. Questions are, as always, more than welcome. I would really stress the value of asking them as we go along. If sort of experience serves me right, I will hopefully save a little bit of time towards the end to make sure that I can answer any questions. In fact, I will answer any questions towards the end. But if I see any as we go along, or my colleagues are also online, see anything that's quite poignant, please do shout out and I'll do my best to answer. So a little bit about myself. I won't talk for too long. This could probably take the entire hour session, but we will be sort of hard pressed to keep it to the time limit. So yes, my name is Alexander Leach. I am the sort of senior education manager at the ACCA, but previously I've worked for Global Training Partners as a professional tutor. In addition to, I did my ACCA, so I'm actually a fellow of the ACCA come, what month are we in? Next month. Really looking forward to that on a personal note, but I studied with one of the big four, and therefore I have personal experience not only of doing these exams, but also teaching them and helping students all around the world and the Middle East region for their sort of collective exam success. I'll be sharing our contact details towards the end of the webinar, but if you do want to reach out, please get in touch via LinkedIn, or I'll share our email address when we keep going. So, next slide. What are we going to be talking about? Well, I'll just start with a little bit of a general sort of getting to know the tax exam, because I'm aware that many of you who are watching this back or online now are in different stages in your ACCA journey. So some of you might be starting out, some of you might already have done the tax exam and maybe doing a reset, which is perfectly fine. Or maybe you studied for it, but then because of COVID-19, you had to have a bit of a break and aiming towards the September sitting or even the December sitting. Just a point to note today, on the 27th of July is the exam entry deadline date, so please do try and get in for September exams if you haven't already. Moving on, I'll give you some tips on how to get started. So, if you are studying for this first time, what sort of resources to look at. We'll dive deep into the examiner's comments, and we'll talk about how the exam's split into three sort of succinct separate sections. Then I'll summarize with some general tips and comments. We'll talk about the plan, prepare and pass framework, and then I'll save hopefully 10 minutes for some Q&A. So taxation, well, we joke about this on a regular basis. It's an essential. It's something that you have to pay in life in varying ways, even in the Middle East. And this is particularly around the UK syllabus, which is actually our largest SAT exam, even in the Middle East. So it ranges from individual taxation systems, companies' taxation systems, and overlaps. And I'll talk through the syllabus very briefly as we go along. So we'll deal with things from income tax liabilities, national insurance for employees, employers, and self-employed people, chargeable gains and inheritance tax, value-added tax, which is something that's becoming more and more poignant as it's been rolled out throughout the Middle East. Many of you will have seen recently the hike in value-added tax in the likes of Saudi, going up to 15%. And then specific company taxes ranging from individual companies and group companies through corporation tax liabilities. What you find with the tax paper is many people really find it very interesting, and it is an essential module of the ACCA qualification, so you do have to do it. But what's great about it is there's such diversity in our students that some students will come in and know everything about it, some will not have a clue, and it's brilliant because then we try and give you a foundation in taxation of a very broad syllabus that you can take on and build into the rest of the qualification. Because when you move up a level, so on from your applied skills, you move into your applied knowledge, applied skills, from applied knowledge to applied skills, then on to strategic professional, you can choose to do an option called advanced taxation. Now, the advanced taxation module is, as you would imagine, an optional module, a step above that of this taxation paper we're talking about now, and looks at it from a very strategic and taxation planning point of view, maybe from a form of advisor, director's position. So, as I was saying, the syllabus is very far-reaching, like many of the ACCA qualifications. And just bear with me 1 second, because before I just get stuck into each element of the syllabus, I'm also just checking that everything's going ahead properly. Fantastic. So do check out the chat panel, guys, because you can see it flashing, and you can see some really good links going in there. So there's one there about the syllabus, and I believe these will keep going. Yet study support resources are in there, so take note of these, copy them, put them into your Google browser or whatever Internet Explorer you're using, and make sure you use these for your studying. So as I was saying, this diagram is quite powerful. It shows actually the overarching sort of UK tax systems and administration that you have to learn, and how they feed into each element of the syllabus, ranging from income tax and national insurance, chargeable gains for individuals, inheritance, often very, very interesting, corporation tax, and then how that gain feeds into VAT. Bear with me 1 second. On successful completion of this exam, candidates should be able to understand, I'm just going to pick up the key highlights here, I don't need to read to you at the end of the day, scope of the tax system and how obligations, so tax liabilities, or even sometimes tax assets, need to be settled against agents, and also the implications of non-compliance. We can also talk about, within this, you'll learn about the income tax liabilities, national insurance, and how that ranges between employees, employers, and self-employed individuals. Chargeable gains on disposal of assets, such as maybe even shares or property. Inheritance tax, which is subject in the UK particularly, and many jurisdictions under tax legislation around the world, when unfortunately people pass away. Corporation tax, which is chargeable and very interesting if you do look at how, and you will learn to some extent, ways in which companies do seek to minimize corporation tax liabilities and how they can legally do that. As well as value-added tax, which I've already touched on recently in relation to how it's been rolled out across the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and very soon the Oman. But again, this syllabus is specifically around UK tax, but it is the most enrolled tax exam for this variant. So what does the exam look like? Well, it's a computer-based exam. Fantastic. It has 3 sections. Section A has 30 marks, 15 objective test questions, each worth 2 marks. So you think, oh, brilliant. Start my exam. I've got 15 questions, and you can just sort of break them down. You can decipher them. I'm going to show you how to do that actually in this webinar. Plenty of time to do that. And they vary based on, drag and drop sometimes. You can have the sort of numerical answers, you input the number yourself, or select A, B, C, or D, that sort of thing. True and false is also part of the objective test questions. Now, the syllabus areas are very broad, as I say, but particularly in section A, you can get some really tricky elements like knowledge-based, or you can get some where they actually are testing your powers of reasoning and understanding and applying, and you'll have to do some computations. Section B is then 3 objective test questions, which have 3 sections, so 3 cases, little mini cases, 5 questions, each worth 2 marks per case, and they do tend to build on. So you might be given a scenario, I don't know, Tahir has purchased assets on X date and sold them on Y date, and Helen has X amount of income, but also some form of charitable donations, and you have to do some computations to work out what their chargeable gains are, what their implications to taxes in terms of their income tax, and it creates the scenarios, and it goes A, B, C, D, and there's 5 questions. Now, what's great about section B is that you get that scenario. It does to some extent create an element of sort of inductive reasoning, really good level thinking around the tax, and you assimilate a lot of learning and show a lot of learning and knowledge within those questions. You're applying them to a case. Section C is actually my favorite, but that's just inherent because I like the way that this now asks for you to do a bit more in terms of writing. And we'll spend more time on section C, so 40 marks available. There's 1 10-mark question and then 15 marks, or 2 15-mark constructed response questions where you have to write an answer, perform some analysis, maybe even give some advice on tax treatments and talk about how that tax planning can be implemented from a case's perspective. So where to start? As I say, students are very diverse. You might never have picked up a tax textbook. This may be the first thing you've looked at. You might just start your ACCA journey and go, do you know what? I'm going to have a look at the tax exam. So you want to analyze specimen and past exams. I think that's really important to note. You want to make sure that you start with an exam, and you can find them on our study support resources website. They're freely available. Check out the past exams, because ultimately that's what you're going to be tackling. You're going to be going into the exam and I've got my pen and paper, but into the exam on screen, and you want to be able to go through them and just get familiar with the exam. Then you would do really well to review the examining team guidance. So one of the brilliant things is that we as ACCA as an organisation, our examining team publish a lot of freely available resources that hopefully you'll have the link for now, that you'll be able to go in, decipher, read, and actually gain a lot of value from, because these are written by the same teams and people who write the exams, you know, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. You want to review the themes of the examiner's reports, and we'll be doing that. You know, I say that many students, you might just pick up the one, you know, the latest examiner's reports, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. This is March's examiner's report. If you've not seen it, get it now. It's fantastic. But you might then want to go back and look at, you know, December's from last year, September's, June's, maybe just check out the last 4 to 6 examiners reports, because you'll be able to see key themes through them. You know, people not managing their time correctly, people not completing some of the objective test questions, people not expanding on answers. Then you would be probably in a good place to review the syllabus, so study guides as well as examinable documents for your exam. It's really good if you want to check out the syllabus. I know I've given you a very quick overview of it. It's quite detailed, it's a large document, but you can then go into the finer details within each syllabus section. You want to then view the study support videos. As I say, there's lots of freely available videos online on our social media at the ACCA Middle East, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Check us out. There's lots on there, all freely available, as well as the ACCA website. And then review the exam techniques and syllabus update articles that are available to you. Now, articles is an important point to mention as well. There are examiner's articles written by the examiner to give you insights into maybe particular areas of sort of difficulty that students face. And us as tutors and the education team often talk about how the articles coincide with what comes up in exams. The team often write these up to maybe 12 months in advance, just like the exams themselves. So it's well worth looking at the articles section on the ACCA's tax exam website and going back even, you know, 2 years, 3 years, reading the examiner's articles, because they really do give you an insight into how the examining team and the examiners think, and also give you a lot of specific knowledge around really good areas of the syllabus, and therefore you can take that and apply it in your exam. So here we go into the examiner's comments. Just bear with me for 1 second. All right then, just checking everything's all right on the platform. Fantastic. So nothing's popping up in the question and answers panel just as yet. I'd really love it if, for those who are, you know, online now live, if you had any questions, please just pop them into the question section. I'll be more than happy to answer them as we go along, but it's always good to see a lot of audience engagement and interaction. So please do that as we go along. And then I'll now get stuck into the examiner's comments. So if you haven't had this document already, bear with me 1 second. Do apologize, just trying to open up the sharing platform once more. There we go. So hopefully that's now back on there. Yes, if you haven't looked at this already, please go on to the examiner's reports section on our website. You can find it very easily on the links provided. And as you can see, we've got examiner's reports for pretty much every quarter, so every exam sitting. These are designed to give you an insight into what went well, you know, it's not all negative, and also maybe what the common challenges were of students in the last sittings. So the general comments for the tax exam: the model of delivery is a computer-based exam, and therefore candidates do not receive the same questions, but they may receive some commonalities throughout it. So not every student gets the same exam. For section A, the questions aim to provide a broad range of coverage of the syllabus, and future candidates should aim to revise all areas of the syllabus rather than attempting to question spot. Now, I'm not a big fan of question spotting. In fact, I don't really know many tutors who are. The problem with question spotting is, imagine if you get it wrong and you're thinking, oh wow, I've just spent all this time revising one small area, I don't know, reliefs or benefits, and then wow, it doesn't come up, nothing comes up on it. Well, imagine how, you know, the chances of failing is significantly increased. And given the nature of the exam, it's such a broad exam with 3 sections and a lot of questions, you're probably going to get a question on pretty much every element of the syllabus. So don't try and question spot. I'm going to look at 2 particular questions that are actually in your examiner's report. And I'm going to debrief them, and I'm going to talk you through them, and I'm going to tell you maybe how I would go about it in terms of a question approach. And remember, there's only 15 of these, and they're only 2 marks each, and you want to be taking up to a maximum of a few minutes per question. But what's great about it is some of these questions you can do really quickly because they might just be knowledge based, but then some of them you can take that time saved and then build it in. So we will just keep moving forward quite nicely. So example 1, and I'm going to show you where I pull out. So I'm going to highlight things as we go along, and I'm going to pull out key bits. I think the first place to start is actually the requirement, and many students don't do this. They're like, oh, I'll read everything, and this is a bit of exam technique. I'll read everything, and then I'll read it again. And unfortunately, that often leads to a bit of time wasting, and I want to emphasize that this is still a time pressured exam. You want to try and make the best use of your time, so time management is key, and therefore reading the requirement does help to decipher and create what's called active reading, where your mind will look at the pertinent and important data within the small scenario given. Which 2, and again, I'm emphasizing the 2 because you would not believe how many students would pick 1 and then try and move on, 3 and try and move on. Now, what's great is that you wouldn't really score any marks if you did that because you asked for 2. So bear that in mind. Which 2 of the following statements are true? And again, emphasize on the word true. Many students sometimes get confused and they might look for the ones that are untrue. So which 2 statements are true in relation to Zara, and they've pointed out the key persons, income tax liability for the year ended 2018 and 19. So here comes some interesting information in the case. They're a married couple, Dane and Zara. They jointly own a residential property and let it to tenants. The year is 2018-19. It's always important in tax for many reasons to get into the habit of picking your year. For all sorts of reasons, different forms of tax relief over different years, different rates in which you can apply, but make sure you take note of the tax year. For the property business income of £20,000. So they're getting quite a lot of money in for renting out this property. Dane earns 25% of the property and Zara earns 75% of the property. Now that is also important because that could have an impact depending on how they wish to split, and they may opt to elect for certain electives. Now we'll keep going. No elections, okay, and Zane earns £65,000 and Dane receives £1,780 of child benefit. Dane has no other income. So you'd have to, pull out a few bits of pro formas. You might want to do an income pro forma for Zane, and then also you need some certain knowledge on the requirements here. So 4 requirements, you're going to have to pick 2 of them. Zara's taxable income is 63,150. Now you'll have to do a computation to figure that out. And this is where I often think, right, which one's glaringly wrong? Which one doesn't make any sense? Zara can reduce her income tax liability by claiming the transferable personal allowance, the marriage allowance. Okay, well, that's interesting. They talked about maybe not taking any elections, but I don't know if I can rule that one out straight away. It would be beneficial for Zara to, start that again. It would be beneficial to Zara if the couple were to make a joint election to HMRC and Customs specifying their actual ownership of shares in a residential property. And the child benefits, this is D, charges 1,788, will be added to Zara's income tax liability. Well, the first one that I can actually rule out, which is not true, is C. It would not be beneficial for Zara. The reason being is that income tax generated from assets, which is jointly earned, is split 50-50 between spouses, regardless of the actual ownership. So irrespective of her actually earning 75%, they only split it down the middle. So that's actually the £10,000 that she would be taxed on. So if we just go through this again, it would not be beneficial to Zara to make a joint election specifically for the actual ownership, given that she earns 75%, and therefore will be taxed on £15,000 and not £10,000, which would be down the middle. This would increase Zara's tax liability for the year, and it would also mean that more income will be taxed at a higher rate of 40% under the current 50-50 split. So it's not good for Zara. So you can rule C out. Fantastic exam technique. Now, I can't think of any others I want to rule out straight away. So I'm now going to ask myself, well, which ones are correct? And to do that, I need to calculate Zara's taxable income liability. So from the information in the case, you can see that she earns £65,000. She takes half of the property income. The personal allowance for 2018-19 was 11,875, which means that statement A is correct because the figure that comes out of this lovely pro forma for welcoming the tax or the actual total taxable income is 63,125, which is A. So we're already halfway. We worked out one of them is incorrect and this one's right. So that then, through the power of deduction, leaves us with B and C. B is also incorrect. It is not possible for Zara to claim transferable personal allowance from Dane, as she is a higher rate taxpayer. Now, this is knowledge base that you would learn throughout the syllabus of the ACCA tax qualification and tax exam. In order to claim a transferable personal allowance, neither spouse or civil partner can be a higher or additional rate taxpayer. So therefore you rule C out, which ultimately means D is correct. Now the issue here is you just want to prove that statement. So in order to prove it, a child benefit income tax charge arises when an individual is in receipt of a child benefit and either they or their spouse / civil partner or person with whom they live with, if they are married or in a civil partnership, is net adjusted above £50,000. Zara earns over £50,000. She actually earns 63 plus or 65 plus the adjusted net income. So therefore, this 1,788 would therefore be added on to Zara. So a child benefit charge of 1,788 will be added to Zara's income tax liability because they are a married couple. Looking at example 2 and using a similar approach, remember I looked at which ones are incorrect, which ones I need to do some form of calculation for, and I'm using the power of deduction on these OT questions to try and create an easier question, minimizing your scope for potential error. Place to start is always and will always be the requirement, which 2 of the following statements are true. So make sure you pick 2. So we'll start with reading the requirement, picking out what I need to learn. And this question is all about entrepreneurial relief and gift relief. So it's a knowledge-based question to many extents that you need to have a good knowledge base of entrepreneurial relief and also gift relief. Daniel has a 30% share in a manufacturing partnership since 2012. He intends to dispose of his entire interest in the partnership in the year 2018 to 19 by selling it to his son at less than market value. Okay, well, that's interesting, but I'm not sure if it's relevant necessarily. Daniel also is a director and has 10% shareholding in an unquoted, notice how I emphasize that, unquoted investment company since 2008. He has decided that I gift his shares to his daughter for the year end 2018 and 19. First part of this, which answer is not correct? So A, entrepreneur's relief is available on the disposal of an interest in the partnership, but not on shares. Interesting. Entrepreneur's relief is available on the disposal of shares, but not on the interest of a partnership. So they're opposites, so maybe one of them will be true. An entrepreneur's relief is available on both disposals, potentially. We'll have to keep going. Gift relief is available on the disposal of interest in a partnership, but not on shares. And gift relief is available on disposal of shares, but not in partnership. Again, that negative. So maybe they're trying to pull us away from different answers and confuse us. And the last one, gift relief is available on both the disposals. So the question here is, how much do you really know about either entrepreneur's relief and gift relief? And it's evident, given this question is in the examiner's report, that many students might have struggled with this. Entrepreneur's relief is available where there is a material disposal of a business asset. This includes disposals of whole or part of a business carried on by an individual, either alone or in partnership, which has been owned by the individual throughout the period of 2 years ending the date of disposal. Therefore, entrepreneur's relief is available on the disposal of the interest in a partnership. So we can, be happy about that, tick that box to some extent. But this is where we now need to figure out, is it available on the shares? Entrepreneur's relief is also available in respect to disposal of shares and securities in a trading company. Notice how I emphasized trading company earlier. Or a holding company of a trading company, where the company is the individual's personal company and the individual is an officer or an employee of the company, and these conditions are met throughout the period of 2 years ending the date of disposal. Entrepreneur's relief is therefore not available in respect to the disposal of shares because the shares are in an unquoted investment company and not a quoted company. So therefore C is incorrect, B is incorrect, but A is correct. So I can see a lot of people popping up in the chat panel now, so fantastic. And I can see a few questions coming in. I'll look at them very shortly. I'm just going to finish this question and then I'll take a second to review those. So what about gift relief? Well, gift relief is available where a gift or a sale at undervalue by an individual of a qualifying business asset, which includes those in the use of trade, professions or vocations, carried on by the donor and shares and securities in a trading company. Therefore, gift relief is available in respect to the disposal of the interest in the partnership to his son for less than market value. However, is not available in respect to the gift of shares for his daughter, since the company is not a trading company. So we can rule out F, we can rule out E, but the answer is D. So the statements that are correct include A, entrepreneurs relief is available on disposal of interests in the partnership, but not the shares. And the gift relief is available on disposal of interest in the partnership, but not the shares. And I think the most important part within this sort of pretext was all around the unquoted investment in the company and having a solid foundation in your knowledge on entrepreneurs relief and gift relief. So now you can see what section A looks like with a couple of OT questions. I'm now going to have a look at section B, but before I do that, I'm just going to check if there's anything going on in the questions section and anything going on in the chat panel. So I can see in the chat panel, fantastic. There's lots of fantastic ACCA resources being shared to you. So please make sure you're copying in those links, putting them into your search engines or onto your, your browser, and saving them in your favorites for when you are doing your exam. They are available for all of the other papers as well. So not just taxation, they're available at every single ACCA exam. Great question. I might as well just answer this straight away. How far should we go in terms of checking the exams reports most recent sitting? Hamid, that's come from you. Thank you very much. I would highly stress the need to review and read more than one exams reports. So yes, start with the most recent. So this is March's, but as I say, they're available every quarter. So maybe go back at least a year, 18 months, even sometimes 2 years to show a pattern of maybe common mistakes or even common, advanced areas. So even common good areas as well. It's not just all negative. So yeah, I'd go back at least 2 years, should I say. Thank you very much, Hamid, for that question. Right then, section B, here we go. Section B tests candidates' knowledge in more depth than section A. There are 3 OT questions, i.e. 3 OT cases, 5 OT questions, each worth 2 marks and 10 marks per each case. Case questions can be examine a variety of aspects of particular taxes, for example, private tax for residence relief, chattels. I love the chattel when I was doing my taxation exam and doing a bit of teaching, investors relief, and calculations of capital gains tax. Some key points here. It's important to read the requirement. You wouldn't believe how many students skip and try and even guess sometimes. I've seen some students wildly guess A, B, C, D. Don't do that. It's absolutely ridiculous. Make sure you read the requirements and read them very carefully. You can see my exam technique when I talked you through those first 2 OT questions is to go to the actual requirement first, because when you are reading the case, and even more so in section B and C, when you're reading the case, you are actively reading, looking for true and false statements, looking for specific taxes, and particular reliefs. Candidates must cover the whole syllabus in the revision. Massive syllabus. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is a big exam and a large syllabus given the nature of taxation. But what's fantastic is you can break it down into those blocks, for individuals, then you've got your VAT, and then for companies, and you can break it down into further blocks as well. Many of my students are students who I've worked with all around the world and the region often find things like spider diagrams, mind mapping, flowcharts really help with taxation and creating, a bit of a fact sheet for one particular element or area of tax, and using that and learning that. One of the best pieces of advice I could give anybody who's studying ACCA or any qualification, particularly ACCA, is make sure you involve other people within your learning, because you can learn so much by teaching others. So when you are revising the taxation syllabus, you want to be creating summary sheets on particular taxes and then handing them to, a family member, a spouse, a partner, a friend, and saying, I know you don't really know anything about this, or maybe you're lucky that they are also an ACCA member or an accountant, so maybe they do know a lot about it, but maybe even if they don't, your parents, for example. Hi, I just want you to ask me a couple of questions, pass them the document on chargeable gains. And you can have that one sheet, and then you can try and teach them about income tax, inheritance tax as well. And you'll really find the engagement you get. People really do want to help you, and I think that's an important thing. Make sure you involve other people, make sure you break the syllabus down into manageable chunks and actually teach others, because it'll allow you to learn. Candidates are advised to practice as many questions as possible. Now, I'll stress this as well, but I can't overemphasize. If I could just do a full hour saying the word practice and then playing it to you in your sleep, I think I would, because ultimately it is extremely important. These exams are not easy. They're designed to be challenging. They're for a chartered accountancy professional, globally recognized professional qualification. So they are designed to be difficult. And as such, practicing them 2 at a time in exam standards, make sure you lock away, keep some time, in your diaries, plan your time out throughout the week towards your studying for September. We're only about a month and a bit away, maybe 6 weeks away from the exam now, and you've got plenty of time to be doing exam standard questions. It's really important that you do this, and make sure you also apply your knowledge to the given scenario, because that's a higher level skill. One thing is being able to retain and understand certain elements of tax and tax syllabus, but a really higher level skill is to be able to apply them to scenarios. So before I move into section C, I'm just going to take a moment to just take one breather, and then also check the question panel, because I can see a few people asking questions in there. Thank you, Krishna. Great question. Any professional marks for F6? It used to be called F6 for those who weren't aware. It's now just called Taxation, or TX for short. There are no professional marks for the tax exam. However, the professional marks start to become a big part in your strategic professional level, so the final stage of your ACCA exams. Thank you, Krishna. Right then, what have we got? 25 minutes left, plenty of time. And we've got, all of section C to talk about, and then some. So away we go. Remember, section C is 40. What's that? Remember, things the wrong way around. 40 marks, 10 marks for the first one, and then 2 15 marks for constructive response questions. Particularly in this exam, so in relation to March exam, candidates were presented with questions drawn mainly around areas of benefits, taxable total profits, tax planning for married couples, which was actually very difficult for many students, capital allowances, which I find extremely interesting, and I think many students do find that a very interesting part of the taxation syllabus, computations of individuals' income tax liability, and then comparisons on operation via a limited company or being employed. So there's quite a bit there. If you were to pick up December's and September's and June's previous year's exams reports, it varies. So I, again, would advocate reading the older exams reports, because they also give you insights in other areas of the syllabus. But I'm going to start off by diving into benefits. So section C, benefits. And then I'm going to provide an overall summary towards the end of this particular part of the exam. So the examiner said, where information is provided on 2 separate taxpayers, then candidates should answer either in the order of the information that is provided, or use 2 columns for each taxpayer. And now here I'm going to emphasize the importance of understanding what I would call pro formas, because they are ultimately the guidance, the structure that you need for your exams when creating any form of, whether it is benefits, whether it's capital gains. The pro formas are really important. And one thing that I get students to do is create, again, a bit like I talked about mind maps or all-in-one sheets, create the pro formas and try and ultimately memorize the pro formas. You can pass that to your study buddy, accountability buddy, as I was inferring earlier, and say, right, I need to learn this pro forma and I want to know where to start. All right, well, I'll start with the person, and then I'll start with this particular item and keep going. Within this particular section as well, so in particular benefits, any exempt items should simply be listed within the main computation and then indicated as such by the use of a 0. And some students would not put this in, they just ignore it completely. And the problem with that is they miss half a mark. I mean, who doesn't want half a mark for putting a 0 in? So make sure you keep putting the 0s in where they are not actually applicable, but you need to know the knowledge basis. A question may provide guidance as to how to approach an answer, and this is where I say take direction, because the examiner is telling you by virtue of the question that ultimately how to approach it. So you want to use the workings, for example, work out the additional tax payable and then adding this to the tax figure given. Don't do it the opposite way around, because you won't score the marks. But yet many students sometimes don't take that direction. So I would emphasize, if there is direction given, follow it. Although there might be half a mark for recognizing an exemption, it is important to know that various exemptions so that the time slots are not wasted. So again, time management is a big thing in all of these exams, particularly in tax, by having to produce a complicated working. So where you know and are aware of particular exempt benefits, Don't try and do any computations. Make sure that you recognize them by using a 0 within your pro forma and computation, and therefore keep moving and keep passing on. Keep getting the marks. You know, it's all about getting the fullness of the exam done. You don't have to get every computation and every exam answer perfect. It's a 50% pass mark. You've just got to get through the exam and answer as many questions as you can in the best possible time management. Taxable total profits. Many workings from this style of question can be included within the main computation. The order of items within the main computation should generally follow the layout of the question, and it does when it gives you the scenario. So you want to follow the scenario and the requirement itself. So remember, take direction. It also makes it really easy for the markers, and who doesn't want, you know, their job when they're doing the marking to be a lot easier. I think, you know, that's one of the things. Be kind to the markers, and hopefully they'll be kind to you. So if you do follow, and we'll talk the importance of headings and structures, but if you do follow the actual computation through the layout of the question, it makes it easier to mark, and it also allows for allocations of marks to be done in a very easy manner. Where a question involves more than one company, candidates should be careful not to mix up the information. Such problems can be avoided by carefully reading the question, the irony. Now, I think, you know, having taught many exams across the ACCA qualification, I'm more than aware that students feel that time pressure, and therefore they might skim read and rush. And the problem with that is, particularly if it's two individuals or two companies in this instance, it's important to keep them separate. So therefore the pro formas really help structure, as well as the likes of subheadings and splitting things out pragmatically as you go along. Tax planning for married couples. This was a particular element that in March sitting was not very well answered. And therefore, ultimately, you can probably expect that this will come up again in some manifestation within maybe September or December's exams. What you find is where students really struggle with things, the examiner and the examining team say, right, well, we know that students struggle with this, so we need to increase the competencies and put it back into our exam to make sure that our students, you know, getting up to the mark that they need to pass. So where tax and national insurance contribution figures are given for an original scenario, then candidates should never, and I've bold, underlined, and also highlighted, never attempt to recalculate these figures for themselves. All this does is waste valuable time. If the requirement asks for a full tax computation to answer, or for the support of an answer, then you should actually produce a full tax computation. Calculating the tax itself, so the tax saving itself, is not sufficient, and it's actually, you know, the inverse of that. If you're asked to produce just the extract for the saving, just do that and don't waste your time doing too much. You know, it's all about taking lead through the requirement and giving you and taking the lead and sort of direction from the requirement itself. Where there are 5 proposed tax planning measures, then it would be obvious that the full tax computation is not required for each 5 of these proposals. We've got this sort of section continued as well. It was the largest section of the examiner's reports for tax planning for married couples. The candidates should never forget basic principles. You know, make sure you build on those principles that you will learn throughout the taxation exam. So, for example, gains should not be included within the income tax computation, and gift aid donations should not be used to extend the basic rate tax band not deducted within the computation. There is no need for detailed reports when it comes to showing the overall tax savings. A simple computation using the before and after figures is sufficient. It is important that candidates appreciate the interactions which can arise in the questions testing higher level skills. And this is why articles have been published covering many of the scenarios which could be examined, because there are interactions between taxes. And I think it's important. In fact, there is a specific exam on this, specific article on this, which you'll be able to find on the ACCA Study Support Resources Taxation section of our website. Go on to the examining guide and examining team guidance and the article section and have a look for it there, as well as many other fantastic articles. These, again, are written by the examiner in relation to potentially what's coming up in the exam, and therefore give a good indication of how the examiner thinks and also feels in terms of the tax that they're talking about, and a really good way of supporting your learning and gaining more insights than maybe just the overall sort of textbook that you might potentially be looking at. Coming towards the end of this section C, so we've got now capital allowances as well. Bear me 1 second. Yeah, capital allowances. So within this section, where companies cease trading, it is very important to understand that the basic principle, and I've underlined and bold and highlighted this, of not writing down allowances. First year allowances or annual investment allowances are given for the period of cessation. It is also important to keep items in the main pool and the special rate pool, showing clearly that you don't get these mixed up, and make sure that you put balancing allowances and balancing charges. Be specific about these. Computations of individual income tax liability. As already mentioned, candidates should think carefully about which workings can be included as one-line calculations within the computation and which need their own separate working. Candidates should make sure they understand the different tax treatments for contributions to occupational pension schemes, both employee and employer, contributions to personal pension schemes, and charitable donations under gift aid. And we talked earlier about gift aid in the OT questions, but just because it's in section A doesn't mean it won't be in section B or section C as well. Probably one of the last points that I really just want to emphasize is practice as many computations as possible. And that again alludes to writing down the pro formas and the computations, creating these sheets where you can learn about computations for individual income tax liabilities. Make sure you know again for capital gains pro formas, for corporation tax pro formas, inheritance tax pro formas. Try and create these pro formas and therefore learn them, because that will actually make it second nature. And it says it here. If this is done, straightforward workings for car benefits and mileage allowances in this instance here become second nature, meaning that marks can be obtained really quickly, quite quickly, without making basic mistakes. So the value of understanding the computations and pro formas. Lastly, but certainly not least, comparisons of operating via a limited company to being an employee or being employed. When answering a question involving several computations, it is good practice to have headings. And I often, when it was a handwritten paper, which unfortunately it is not, well, unfortunately it's not actually, it is better as a computer-based paper, but I used to joke around, the need for a ruler. Well, it's no different in your computer-based exam. You need to make sure that you have headings, you can underline them to emphasize to the examiner the structure that you are creating, so therefore they can follow it and award marks easier in that way. Now, the last part's all about national insurance contributions, and understanding the question is probably the most important and poignant point there, so that time is not spent calculating or reinventing or doing irrelevant workings. So that leads me very nicely to sort of a summary for section C, and also some of these lead really well into the other sections of the exam itself. But before I do that, again, as I keep doing quite nicely, just checking the question panel. Yeah, great question. Will this webinar and slides be given to us? I think that's from Fatima. Thank you very much, Fatima. Yes, it will be shared to you after the webinar, so you'll receive a recording, a link to the recording, and I can also see about getting the slides over to you as well. So anybody who's watching, or even maybe watching this back, hopefully you've got those resources now. So thank you ever so much. So just a nice little summary of section C before I keep moving. So I think many of you will realize that a logical flow and layout is extremely important. Pro formas, computations, understanding the different pro formas and computations not only saves time, it creates a structure to your exam, it makes it easier to mark, which ultimately will lead to more marks, hopefully, if you've put it in correctly, and a pass mark, which is the success that we're looking for at least 50%. Use zeros within the pro formas. Now, this was specific to exempt benefits, but again, throughout different computations, if you need to show that you are aware, you can use the zeros within this and you'll get half marks in many instances. Take direction from the requirements. Again, if they ask you to do specifics of adding back or even, starting with certain individuals, applying certain reliefs, make sure that you actually read the requirement. It's quite an important thing. It sounds obvious, but you'd be amazed how many students do not do that. Don't overcomplicate things, it wastes time. So again, if there's not a need to rejig any of the national insurance figures that you've been given, don't try and reverse engineer them. Just keep moving and use the earn figure rule. No mix-ups between individuals and companies. If you give them more than one person or more than one company in the scenario, try and make sure that you focus on the person you are being asked about within the requirement. Do what the requirement asks. Many of the times where we've taught different exams, we stress to students the need to actually do what's asked, and sometimes students will just see particular words and then jump straight in and they might really like, as I say, capital gains. So they'll do a capital gains computation and they'll get far too into it, and they'll realize they only needed to do a certain small extract from it. So again, do what's asked of you. Don't do too much. You need to just manage that carefully. Never forget the basic principles. You know, I think you can take the analogy from any form of, you know, sport, particularly. Not every superstar footballer or, you know, rugby player or athlete is a Ronaldo or a Messi. Many people get very successful by being extremely good at the principles, the basic principles. And that's the same in anything, particularly in accounting and also within this exam taxation. Don't forget the basic principles. Become good at those through computations, understanding different taxations, having a broad breadth of knowledge of the syllabus, and then build on that and get more complicated. And what's great as well about the qualification in itself is if you really succeed and love tax or want to learn more about it from a more directorial or tax planning point of view, you can do that within the advanced taxation option module and learn and show your knowledge there as well. So you can specialize at a later stage. Headings and structure, you know, I talked about the importance of this. It links quite nicely with, you know, not to waste time reading the requirements, don't get things mixed up, show a structure through computations and pro formas. The headings often guide, particularly in section C, the marker, which again leads to more success. And then practice, 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 practice. I cannot emphasize enough the necessity to ensure that you practice as many questions as possible. As I say, we've got 6 weeks, give or take, to the exams in September. Make sure you allocate time within your study time plan to practice. And little and often is often the way forward. Don't try and cram. Students, you know, I'm not innocent of this myself, so I can talk firsthand. We'll try and cram for these exams, and it does not work. I can tell you firsthand, it does not work. You want to make sure that you practice little and often. Take these 6 weeks, break down the syllabus into the key building blocks, and do questions on a particular area of the syllabus or sections of the exam each evening. And suddenly, all of a sudden, you'll see patterns, you'll understand what's being required, and you will actually get a lot of acumen, tax acumen, from understanding through your practicing. So we've got some general tips and comments coming up. And again, just as a natural pause, I'll see if anything's popped up. Yeah, fantastic. Visit the ACCA Study Support Resources website. Again, back in your chat panel. A couple of questions coming up. Can I provide pro formas? I'll tell you what we can do, Ansira or Samin. We can do those towards the end. So rather than me sharing them now, because there's quite a lot, how about I'll provide our contact details in the next 10 minutes. You can reach out to us directly. And also I'll give you some advice in terms of where to find pro formas and enlisting the likes of an approved learning partner as well. So some general tips and comments. Exam technique, nice, powerful, bold statement there. And again, I could fill the slide in for days with this one, but I think it's just best to talk about it. The value of practicing not only increases your knowledge basis, but also increases your ability to tackle all ACCA exams. When you get into the ACCA's taxation exam, you'll need to be familiar with the system. You'll need to be familiar with how to answer the question. And the only way you can do that is to develop exam technique, knowing that you are going to start with section A, the OT questions, and build your confidence through them. Going through to section B and doing, you know, the smaller, sort of not hugely case questions, but building on them, and then moving into section C. Time management, understanding how much time you need to allocate and when you also need to move on. Exam technique is extremely important, not in just taxation, but all exams. So make sure you are doing the practicing. And you can do that through the word processing and spreadsheet techniques. This isn't purely a numbers-based exam. In fact, to be honest with you, there's such a degree and a big element of being able to actually do word processing. You need to be able to write in a constructive manner that can give advice. And when you are writing based on a figure that you have been given or a computation that you have calculated yourself, and you're giving advice on things like tax planning to individuals or companies, you want to be able to structure it in a professional manner. So therefore, you want to be explaining why. Why should we be looking to minimize this? Why should we be spending more? Why? I often call this the so what approach. Get to the point, keep moving, and also make sure that you're writing in a professional manner with subheadings and structure. The nice 3Ps, I'll give credit to some of my colleagues in the education team. We often talk about breaking down your sort of study periods into the planning phase, the preparation phase, and then the passing phase. So where you plan, get to know your exam. We could say you're doing this to some extent now. Find appropriate study support, and I'll talk about approved learning partners and content providers very shortly. Draw up a study plan. There's available free resources on the ACCA Study Support resource, a study support website, which gives you the planner as well. You can build that on. Prepare learning phase, gaining knowledge. You could probably be coming to the back end towards that now, hopefully, where you will learn a lot about the ACCA qualification, the ACCA taxation paper, and you want to then build that into the revision phase with lots of revisiting important stuff, mind maps, flow charts, spider diagrams, performers, and creating sort of a one-pager to come to. And getting a study buddy or an accountability buddy, a parent, a family member is really a simple idea, and they also want to see you succeed as well. Check your application via question practice. You can do tests, specimens, quizzes, and therefore debrief them yourself and find your own problem areas as well. And then you'll pass, lots of mocks, lots of practice exams. Ensure that you know the actual syllabus widely, time management, and then it may sound a little bit, easier said than done, but relax and sit your exam. And I can tell you firsthand that all the students that I've helped all around the region and the world, and many that I've taught, when they go to the exam, there's not a lot more they can do in terms of retaining information within their brain. They've got a vast amount of knowledge in there. It comes down to that, understanding what your nervous cues are, the anxiety. And I've actually found that many very intelligent students need to obviously learn how to relax, because that's where this, your well-being, we've got a well-being hub on our ACCA website as well to learn about relaxation techniques. Many of them, one that I've used personally is called box breathing, where you breathe in for a count of 4, hold your breath, and then breathe out again. And that helps to relax. And I think many students just need to be able to do that when it comes to the exam, because I appreciate it's a very stressful time when you sat there doing that exam. So the study support resource is a host of freely available resources prepared by industry experts to help assist you and your ACCA students along that journey. You click on it, the link's been popped in there plenty of times now. If you've not got it, go into the chat panel, find it, and go on that one. You'll find it for all of the ACCA qualification with a host of freely available resources. We also have the Virtual Learning Centre, which is fantastic for students, particularly in our region, who need help, particularly with English or maths. And then those who also want to have a bit of a knowledge check tests can go into the new section with the self-check quizzes and scrub up on their knowledge on taxation and other exams as well. I know we've got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to save a bit of time for questions, so I can see a lot of things popping up in the left corner, but just bear with me and we'll get to them. We might even overrun slightly if we need to. It's not a problem for me. Approved learning partners. These are institutes of organizations with world-leading recognized tutors who you should go to for help and support. We have some fantastic ALPs in the region who will be able to help. You can go onto our Middle East hub, go onto our map, go onto our ALP, so Learning Partner Directory, and find somebody to study with. You can also connect with them on the likes of LinkedIn and social media. So to sum it up, ensure you go through the examiner's comments each time you prepare to study for a new exam. They are extremely valuable, and hopefully you can see just from this hour how valuable they are. Understand the examiner's points and incorporate them into your practice early on enhancing your score, because if you understand that, or particularly in this exam, gift relief, entrepreneur's relief was a bit difficult, maybe you want to scrub up on them because it might come up again very shortly. Make use of the study support resources on the ACCA's website with study planners, guides, specimen exams, past exams, and practice using the ACCA practice tests. Now, that does leave us quite nicely with a little bit of time for questions. I can see if there's anything in particular that's jumped out there. Brilliant, thank you very much. Right, so I think that leads us quite nicely. Now, there was a few questions that Helen had. If Helen's on, which I wouldn't mind just sort of raising to the audience, if Helen could sort of fire them through. So if there's one or two there, Helen, that would be fantastic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Fabulous. Yes, I had a couple of questions come through. The first one, I'm intending to take more than one exam this sitting. What other exam paper goes well with taxation?
Ooh, well, one of the brilliant things about the taxation exam is that it is a nice sort of balance between numbers and also written elements. So it doesn't just fall within a computations heavy exam or, you know, a written heavy exam, maybe like audit, but it does allow for you to complement other papers. Now, one of the ones that I used to teach particularly was law. And tax and law tend to work quite nicely together because they're both quite rules-based approaches to examinations. So if you are a student and you're starting off on your ACCA journey and you've not done your law exam and you want to do 2 exams, law is actually a computer-based exam that can be sat on demand. So you could fit that in flexibly throughout your study journey. You could also choose to pair taxation with the likes of audit and assurance. And that would work quite nicely because there's an element of overlap there. But one thing I would avoid, maybe just sort of to build on that question, is doing a taxation exam and then one of the strategic professional exams, which is a big far reach. I've had students come to me where they've done tax and advanced tax at the same time, and I would highly stress that that's not the best thing to do, given the sheer volume and the breadth of both syllabus, and then the higher level skills that I needed to be built on as a result of the taxation exam being a prerequisite to some extent to the advanced taxation exam. So thank you very much for that question, Helen.
Okay, next one I have is, I keep running out of time in my exam. What should I do to try and combat this?
Brilliant, thank you very much, Helen. It's not something that you're alone on. Many students often struggle, particularly with their first sort of few exams, with the time management. You know, they get through section A and then they realize that actually they've not got a lot of time for B or C. And it's about recognizing which questions don't take a lot of time and which ones you can use that approach, you know, as we did in the OT questions when I did a debrief, which questions are, you know, which statements are incorrect, you can rule them out. And that comes ultimately from practice. Practice makes perfect. You can go on, get a host of our freely available resources. We have approved content providers who can provide you with exam standard questions for taxation, and you can do them. Make sure you time them, grab your phone, put a little timer next to you, and make sure you stick to the time allocated per question per section, and that will help you with time management, putting yourself that practice under pressure. Thank you, Helen. Next one.
Great. Okay, so the last one I have is, I really struggle with taxation. Are there any additional resources you would recommend?
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Helen. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've shown you already the sheer value and breadth of resource on the ACCA's website. But again, if you've used them and you need a little bit of help in terms of, bear me 1 second, if you need a little bit of help in terms of additional resources, it might be a good idea to get involved with the likes of a approved learning partner, and therefore enlisting an expert, just get in touch with them and seeing what products and resources they have at very affordable prices. Many of them have moved to online, many of them have got blended learning approaches. Obviously, there's also classroom approaches, and they're the experts who will be able to help you with your studying. And they will also entwine their courses with many of the available resources that the ACCA have. So whether that's, you know, the practice platforms for the computer-based exams, make sure you get on board with that, the virtual learning center, the examiners reports. There is also one really effective resource, and you know how I love to keep things simple, which is the on one page, the taxation document, tax on one page, that you can find on the ACCA Study Support Resource website, and you can go on there and you can use that as a great basis and a foundation to build upon. So I think, you know, a good blend of supported learning with self-taught learning and the resources, make sure you make use of them. There's so many there. So as I said, you know, reach out to us. Our email address is there, educationme@acccaglobal.com. You can also go direct to our ACCA Middle East hub. So that's www.accame.me. I would massively stress the value of going on there. You'll be able to keep up to date with us by following us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, at ACCA Middle East. And as I say, I really look forward to hearing from you all. Best of luck with your exam in September or December, and do reach out if you need anything. Thank you very much and do take care. Bye-bye.